Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Westwood Living Podcast Network. Tom Leyden with you, coming to you from the offices. Do you call these offices, Sydney?
The studio.
The studio of Exerpsych. And this is a place you may not be too familiar with yet, but you should be, and that's the reason why we're having this conversation. Meet Sydni O'Connell. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Fantastic. It's nice to get this opportunity to chat with you and learn more about you and your business, and I'm fascinated by it because I have 2 teenage daughters. So I kind of understand your target market.
Yes. Yep.
And let's just let you run with it a bit and tell your backstory, because you've got this great combination of being an athlete, of being a clinical psychologist who works with students.
Yep.
That's a nice combo.
Yes.
And you've been able to sort of package it all together to work for you. So take us through what Exerpsych is all about.
Sure. So like you said, we're all about physical health and mental health, marrying those 2 things together. So it kind of started for me, like you said. I've been an athlete my whole life, and I've always gravitated toward physical movement, right, to make myself feel better, honestly. Going through teenage years myself, if I was ever down in the dumps, go outside, shoot some hoops, or go for a light run. I always understood the correlation before I really knew what it was doing in my brain, but always knew that moving my body made myself feel better, lifted my mood. And then I worked in a public middle school for 7-8 years or so during COVID years. And kids came back in cohorts. So some kids in the building one day, just more flexibility with less kids at one time. And that's when I really started to bring kids for walks during our counseling sessions, or to the gym to play basketball or a different game. And kids just started to open up. It was a no-brainer. And again, I was like, the physical movement, helping the mental health piece, there was no going back. So that's when I left the school, came and created Exerpsych, where we do some one-on-one support, but now we're really focusing on our group model, just as a place for kids to move their bodies. Right now, the preteen and teenage girls move their bodies, connect with one another, chat, and just leave here feeling better than when they walked in.
I've got questions.
Yeah.
And I'm going to hit you with some of them. Let me give you my number 1 question right off the bat. What is it about exercise that makes somebody feel more open to opening up?
Yep. The happy chemicals, right? Like you hear about serotonin, dopamine, all those things, going to the brain. That's one thing. And then it's a distractor in many ways. So kids come in here anxious, all worried about things that are going on outside of here in school. It shifts your focus to something else. So there's just so many things, so many benefits.
Okay. For background purposes, and so you can begin to understand where Exerpsych is located, in Westwood, technically Hartford Street, it is behind Pliables, Camellas, Arch Orthodontics. It's right next door to Universal Power Yoga, so I'm trying to get you understanding exactly where Sydney has her studio. Now, let's talk about you.
Okay.
And where'd you grow up?
Walpole.
Okay. And people who follow high school sports probably remember Sydney from a few years ago, because you did play basketball. Take us through the trajectory of your basketball career, because it did extend into college.
Yes, and it may have been more than a few years ago. So I was at Walpole High, graduated in 2009, played basketball there. We had a great little team, some of the best years. And then I played at the Division III level, Hobart and William Smith colleges in upstate New York for all 4 years of my collegiate career, which was great. And then, the sports, as it does for many people, sports come to kind of a rearing halt, and you find how to channel that passion into a career or, the next step.
What was it about psychology, psychiatry that drew you in?
Good question. Psychology, I've always been a helper. I've always, wanted to help people. I've always been fascinated just by like human behavior. And what makes people different, behave differently, act differently. So I took an intro to psych course in high school, and that's when, my interest really peaked. And then I was undeclared at the start of college, as many are, and then I went with psychology as my major, child and adolescent studies as my minor, and as well as Spanish. I had a professor at the end of my undergraduate career say, what are you going to do when you leave? What's next? And I said, definitely graduate school. And she said, for what? And what part of psychology? And I was like, well, I don't know. And she said, don't go yet. It's a big investment, and figure out what you want to do. And I learned a little bit more about school psychology because I really liked working with kids. Kids spend most of their time in school. So I started learning more about that field, and I really liked how it blended education and mental health, and that's what I went to graduate school for.
So not speaking specifically, but as an example of working in a school, how is your expertise implemented? How does somebody find their way into your office, and how do you start integrating yourself with that young person's life?
How do they find me here outside
No,
of the school, or
when you're in the
a
school?
Okay.
I just want to understand that job, which is the job you had before you did this. So
Yes.
at what point is this kind of like, you know what, you should talk to Miss O'Connell?
Yes, that job, you wear many, many hats as a school psychologist in a school. So oftentimes we do evaluations. So we test for learning disabilities, emotional disabilities. These are all educational disabilities. So you go through an evaluation process where you're the one administering these tests to the kid. And then if they qualify, you'll sometimes be listed as a service on their IEP or their 504 plan that you should meet with the school psychologist for X amount of minutes per week. So that's one way. I became even more passionate about the more kind of proactive. So, I think all kids could benefit from meeting with a mental health professional in the school. So in an ideal world, the school psychologist would be available to any kid in the building, and they would know that you're there, similar to guidance counselors, and they could come and just make a time to meet with you and chat.
All right. You're friendly as all get out, but there's still that obstacle of, do I really want to do this?
Yes.
Why do I have to do this? So you fight through that.
Yes.
And when did it click to you? It's like, hey, I think I can combine my two passions here and try to break down that barrier. I want to hear that evolution.
Yeah. There was actually, so I was interning in graduate school as a school psychologist with a supervisor in Brookline Public Schools, and he had a student who it was on his IEP to see the school psychologist, so like a mandated service. So, and this student would show up and just honestly sometimes walk into the room and not speak. And nothing. And it made for a long 50 minutes. And my supervisor was saying, there's got to be something we can do for this kid. How are we going to help him? They went into this school, had a gym. They sat on rowing machines side by side, just casually started rowing. And the kid, he started talking.
Crazy.
It was incredible. It was, so that was a pivotal moment for me where I realized, it's not effective to have the kid just come and sit down. Some kids can, sure, but to just come and sit and look at you across the room, and they just came from math class, they're headed to their science test, and you have this 30 minutes and you say, talk to me, what's going on, right? Like, that doesn't work for a lot of kids. But I think if we can get creative on the rowing machine or go for a walk or go to the gym, things like that, it's a no-brainer.
You talked about group sessions.
Yep.
And maybe we should talk about these separately. Walk me through the experience when somebody opens the door and enters your studio. What's the goal? What should both parents and young people expect?
Yeah. So ultimately, it's meant to be a feel-good space. So you walk in the door. We typically have music blaring. You'll see on the right side is our bike space. So we have 6 stationary bikes over there. Looks similar to kind of like a spin studio, honestly. With the music, we ride to the music, just have fun. And then we have another half of the space, which is more the Zen side, is what I call. But we can also do physical activity over there. We sometimes do body weight exercises and such over there, but we head there the second half of the session, and that's where we kind of just sit among the fairy lights and chat with one another, maybe play a game, maybe do some kind of activity. And again, it's all about the whole space is just meant to make you feel good.
So Sydni is officially our expert contributor in adolescent mental health, and you're actually going to read her first expert contribution in the May issue of Westwood Living. And generally speaking, is there an overview or a summary that you could use as a preview to people who are probably going to be hearing this before they have the opportunity to read that?
Oh, very nice. Okay. I would say, I definitely encourage you to read it. It really talks about the need for proactive, preventative, mental health care, really. That's what we do here at our groups, but being proactive so that we don't wait till crisis time, right? Where all of a sudden you're like, oh gosh, I need to get my kid to see someone because things have hit the fan, kind of thing.
What's the process? How can somebody learn more? What do they do to just get it started? Because I'm sure there's somebody who's looking around the corner saying, like, what's going on over there? Like, what's that about? What do they do?
So visit our website for sure, exerpsych.com, EXERPSYCHED.com. And there's lots of information on there. Follow us on social media, primarily Instagram and Facebook. Lots of information on, how to sign up for groups. We are always looking to create new cohorts depending on what age the kids are interested. So definitely, and feel free to reach out always via email, and I'm happy to help and point you in the right direction if this isn't what you're looking for, or just want to support as many people as we can.
So I need to admit that you've given me a lot of personal challenges because, number one, I have a mental block about the word psych. Whether it's like I'm psyched for this event or psychology, every time I type it, I can't spell it right. So first of all, I'm working my way through that. That's right up there with not being able to say the word lever, like when you pull the lever, because I'm always pull the level. That's a word I avoid. And then on top of it all, people, her name is not Cindy, okay? It's Sydni, and it's Sydni.
Yes.
Got it?
Yes. You're not alone in the psych spelling. That's a struggle for many people. And something with like when you type it,
it doesn't look right.
Yeah. And I get Cindy all the time, so I do respond to it. But yes, it is Sydni.
And I've been typing recently amphitheater. Can't spell that either.
Oh, that's a tough one.
So there's a lot of challenges, but I'm getting there. And before you know it, I'll be able to whip this out. Exerpsych spelled correctly. Sydni I've gotten. What's funny is that somebody else who I work with did not. And I was so careful about it to make sure I got it right because I knew that you had to be sensitive about it because it is a unique spelling of Sydni.
Yes.
And so you came back, you're like, by the way, my name's not spelled right. I was like, what?
I just like to point it out. It really doesn't bother me that much, but I figure let's try to. Yeah.
It's your name. Okay, well, you've mentioned the website, which is exerpsych.com, but what about a phone number?
Phone number is 508-452-2453.
Well, there you go. That's your intro to Sydni O'Connell, Sydni O'Connell, Exerpsych. Check it out and be on the lookout for her first expert contribution in the May issue of Westwood Living. I totally appreciate your support of the publication and hope that it works out well for you. And I do hope you can join us, too, on May 14th.
Yes, that's right. Can't wait.
Have our next party coming up, the Spring Sunset Party at Hale at the Community Circle at the Andrew Cucciara Learning Center. Should be good.
Love it.
So putting the logistics for that together as well. And that's a shout out to all of you, too, to join us on May 14th because that should be a fun event. But for now, just go to exerpsych.com and check that all out. And, of course, as always, if there's anyone else you want me to have a conversation with, just reach out. Send an email. Leyden@bestversionmedia.com. I will find that person. We'll have a conversation, and we'll share it with you right here on the Westwood Living Podcast Network. But for now, from the studio of Exerpsych with Sydni O'Connell, I'm Tom Leyden saying so long, and thanks for listening.